Polished and buffed for the occasion was some of Ford's earliest model cars up to their latest creations. Classics such as this Ford T model and 1938 V8 stood in stark contrast next to the modern-day Falcon and the sporty Capri. More than 100 people helped celebrate the event, which also marked the completion of the company's $250,000 showroom refurbishment. Other cars catching the eye included the GT Falcon, the Ford Prefect, and a 1967 Falcon. Gloucester Ford employs 200 people with an annual turnover of more than $100 million, a far cry from its humble beginnings in a shop in Derby Street in 1934. Jason Jornhoff, NBN News. Workers at Tanner Stainless Fabricating watched in awe as their huge handiwork left the Curry factory today. The 18-metre tall tank bound for an evaporated milk products plant at Hexham was a truck driver's nightmare. It just squeezed through this roundabout and the rig's engine was moaning under the weight. The tank will be used to store evaporated milk products such as yogurts, custards and specialty milks. After delivering the massive tank to the Hexham site, the workers now face a greater task. Somehow they must lift it off the truck and stand it upright. The $5 million Australian Cooperative Foods dairy plant is due to open in April. Before then, a twin of this tank will have to be delivered to stand alongside it. Jason Jornhoff, NBN News.
It's one of the most cliched pairings in sport, the father and son team sweeping all before them. Steve and Daniel Cotton from Raymond Torres are running 5th in the state ski race series, well ahead of some of the sport's more fancied teams. 44-year-old Steve was considering retiring from competition skiing when his 17-year-old son suggested they team up. On race days they ski side by side, but during training Dad stays dry and hands out the advice. Steve believes it's a perfect pairing, his experience and Daniel's youthful enthusiasm.
We don't have the crashes that some teams have, and we just tend to be, that's that father thing I think. It's a dangerous sport, and you tend to feel that the young fellas next to you, and we're going to go hard, but we're going to try and keep it safe.
With the weather predicted to be rough for Sunday's race, Daniel has spent hours on the lake speeding around in the chop.
It does get very scary sometimes. What can you do? It's just an adrenaline rush.
The pull bar race starts at the Belmont 16-footers at 10 o'clock on Sunday, and crews will do 3 laps of the circuit, the lead teams finishing the course in around 30 minutes. Although the Cottons have local knowledge on their side on Sunday, race favourite is still Toukley's Tom Hughes with his boat, Top Gun. Darren Curtis, NBN News.
Sue Depter is still trying to come to terms with the death of her 19-year-old son, Brad Stark, who committed suicide last year. In a couple of years, she saw him change from a happy youth with a promising future to a depressed and deluded young man.
He said to me, Mum, he said, I think I'm losing it. He said, I think I'm losing my mind. He said, I think everybody can read my mind, and the television's saying bad things about me and all this.
The inquest was told that Brad had been smoking marijuana twice a week for about 2 years. The coroner says smoking marijuana caused Brad to suffer a psychotic episode. It was during this time that he hanged himself. Based on medical evidence presented to the inquiry, Coroner Col Elliott says marijuana can no longer be regarded as a soft drug. The effects of cannabis are unpredictable, with about 5% of users developing some form of mental illness.
I found it to be not a soft drug at all. It's dangerous.
Professor Vaughan Carr disputes the medical evidence given to the inquiry that Brad had been suffering a cannabis-induced psychosis for some time. He says any psychotic episode will only last for up to 24 hours.
Cannabis does not cause prolonged psychoses, schizophrenic or otherwise.
The coroner wants the community to be better educated about the dangers of marijuana. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The incident occurred shortly after 1 a.m. in a back bar of the Hotel Muswellbrook. An argument broke out when a male patron was approached by a 20-year-old Aberdeen man.
He approached another man and a verbal argument ensued, and this man then stabbed the 20-year-old in the neck with a beer glass, and causing him a large wound to the chin and the left side of the neck.
The victim was taken to Muswellbrook Hospital. He received stitches to his neck and chin and was discharged late morning. Muswellbrook police are still searching for the offender, who is described as of solid build with light brown hair.
These are the racing cars of the sailing world, the 18-footers in full flight. In a near-perfect 20 to 25 knots southeaster, the top crews let their hair down in the annual Port Macquarie event. Crews like Skilled Engineering, Ella Bachet and AAMI skidding across the river. Taking on the Aussies, a crew from Sweden and another from England. About 4,000 people witnessed the competition over the weekend. A thrill for the fans, as 18-foot racing doesn't get much better than this.
Mark Glanville made the trip north for Parramatta a painful one. The sturdy lock peppering the Eels' attack with bone-crunching tackles. He set the example for the team, and as soon as Parra looked like they had a move on, it was cut short by some pretty strong defence. Not that the Knights had to defend that often. They spent most of the game hovering within their opposition's 25-metre line. Finally, Nathan Barnes put them on the board, turning on a try from dummy half. Parramatta scored after they found some room out wide, but they failed to capitalise and in the end became their own worst enemy, continually penalised for not getting off the tackle player until the referee had had enough and sent a player to the bin for a professional foul. The win wasn't without problems though for the Knights. Matthew Johns was concussed and Robbie McCormack came off second best after hitting a knee with his cheek. Brad Godham was also cut. It's expected all three players may sit out next Saturday's trial game against Cronulla.
"4 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is Jason Proctor's lot, and he loves it. Pacing has been a 20-year family affair for the Proctors. 6 years ago, Jason took over the reins from his father, who now concentrates on the training side of things at their Camberwell property near Singleton in the Hunter Valley.
Well, it's exciting, yeah. It's a sort of... I've played a lot of sports, and the most satisfaction I've ever got out of any sport is harness racing. And it's just a big thrill to win. No matter how many races you win, you just can't stop winning.
And that's the reason why this 18-year-old is the talk of the pacing profession. Currently, he's placed second in the Drivers' Premiership in the Hunter Valley and in the top 10 in the state, with 19 wins this season. In January, Jason won 6 races in a week, including this one at Newcastle. Jason has been selected to represent New South Wales next month in the Inter-Dominion Young Drivers Competition, a series featuring the best under-23 driver from each state.
Well, it was a big thrill to me because at this stage I'm only 18 and it's under 23s, and I was quite surprised to get it at this age because I thought maybe when I was 21 or something like that, but it's a big boost to your confidence and stuff, yeah.
The Inter-Dominion Series is held in New South Wales this year. It features 7 races, 2 of those in Newcastle on March 5th. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Wayne Russell has been clocking up the laps around go-kart and speedway circuits for the last 10 years, made easier by his ownership of the Go-Kart Go complex in suburban Cardiff. It's a big step from go-karts to the power of touring cars, but that's a challenge 31-year-old Wayne has set himself for 1994.
One of the best victories, he's done it in the new V8 Formula. Larry Perkins wins.
Speed to me is really irrelevant. The speed doesn't come into it. It's the enjoyment of being able to drive something to its limit. And taking that to the edge and to the limit all the time, that's the fun.
Wayne had to make do with a push start for the arrival of his VL Commodore sporting team colours. The speed will accelerate this weekend when Wayne tackles the Winton circuit in Victoria to gain experience before his touring car debut on March 6. It's a team effort with most of the crew and sponsors from the Newcastle region. The Newcastle Assault on the Championships is a low-budget attempt, $150,000, compared with the $1 million outlays of the top teams.
Our main aim for this year is to finish every race, and if we're reliable, our speed will follow.
The team has a 4-year plan, expecting a checkered flag not too far down the track. The Hunter Orchestra is best known for its big brassy sound, the blow of trumpets and the crash of cymbals. But its greatest strength is also its biggest flaw.
But traditionally we've been weak in string playing. In the Hunter Orchestra only a fairly small proportion of our professional players come from Newcastle.
To counter the drought of good string players, the orchestra has embarked on an ambitious plan to fine-tune young talent in the Hunter. Orchestra chairman John Robson struck the first chord today, calling on principals at a primary school convention in Newcastle to support a tuition scheme. The orchestra would teach the students, the schools providing the class time and financial support. The best students to be selected in a Hunter Youth Orchestra.
One thing that we think could make the Hunter unique is a number of school orchestras representing the Hunter.
With the best students to graduate to the senior orchestra to make it a truly local musical group.
The hard work of the winemaking process began today as Campese helped with the grape picking. But it was when the grapes were loaded into a crushing machine that Campese began getting confused. He threw a rugby ball and boot into the machine, mistaking the grapes for a Wallaby teammate. Or maybe not.
The idea of just, I don't think you realise, throwing a football boot in a football in there sort of just adds a bit of flavour to the wine, and hopefully people will enjoy it.
Although Pepper Tree Wines and Campese are keeping the project a secret, it's believed the wine will be sold next year to mark the rugby legend's 25th year in the game. And the red wine is expected to portray Campese's elusive, unique playing style.
We're looking at making announcements sometime in the next few months, precisely what it's for and how the wine's developing. But at this stage, we believe it will be a fairly unpredictable style and relatively individual.
I think they're going to call it unpredictable, right, because no one knows what I'm going to do, so you don't know what the wine's going to be like. You have to buy it to try it.
The crushed grapes, ball and boot will soon be put in a wooden cask before Campese bottles and blends the wine himself next year. It seems even in winemaking, Campese has managed to sidestep and dumbfound his peers.
Has been up to some tricks, has he? Yeah. I wonder why everybody was giggling a little bit earlier on. Well, we'll see what it comes out with. It had a fairly peculiar odour, I noticed.
The recent incident in which 4 women contracted AIDS after minor surgical procedures in a Sydney doctor's rooms has heightened awareness about the need for infection control. Recently, the Victorian branch of the AMA and medical manufacturers have criticised the reuse of medical equipment marked for single use only. While it's understood the practice of reusing is common, Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital actually admits to doing it. In some exploratory heart procedures, equipment marked for single use only is reused. The equipment clearly comes into contact with the blood, but according to the John Hunter Hospital, this procedure of reusing equipment is safe.
Our cleaning processes are the same for these devices as we have for reusable devices: cleaning, re-sterilisation.
One of the main reasons the hospital doesn't throw instruments away after a single use is the cost of each item. The hospital doesn't tell patients that it's reusing the equipment, but Professor Fletcher says this isn't an issue.
The doctor's responsibility is to inform the patient of the risks associated with the procedure.
The John Hunter Hospital is not only being upfront about the reuse, it's set up a committee to monitor the procedures. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The Barrington River is flowing freely but is still at one of its lowest levels in years. With less water coming down from the mountains, more and more rocks are exposed, making it difficult for kayak paddlers. The rapids are now also less than fierce. However, it's still good enough for members of the Australian Development Squad to practice before next month's tour of New Zealand. Paddlers from Newcastle on the North Coast make up half of the national team and are spending this weekend at Gloucester honing their technique. The 8-member squad will compete in slalom events in the New Zealand Championships, and although the Aussies are all under 17, they're rated as good medal prospects.
The New Zealanders sent a team over for our national championships, and they sort of fill some of the minor placings through, so it's a similar standard to they're used to in Australia.
Most of these kids started paddling less than 12 months ago. However, after weekly sessions on the Barrington, where they work for hours on their technique, they're now rated as Australia's best. Their coaches put their pupils' success down to a willingness to learn.
Apart from anything else, it's also an observation sport. You watch how the other paddler handles a gate or handles a river, and you say, well, I'm not doing that quite right. I can learn by that paddler, and they improve all the time.
The Australian team leaves for its 12-day tour next month. It's the serious fisherman's tradition, 4 days of competition out of Port Stephens to record the biggest catch. The crews come from up and down the coast for the inter-club tournament, and rivalry between teams is fairly heavy. Some guys take it so seriously they refuse to talk to each other until the tournament is over. However, most people were on speaking terms this morning for the big sail past. 242 boats have entered this year, from trailer boats to 65-footers. The tournament is also an enormous money spinner for Port Stephens. Accommodation is almost entirely booked out, and besides food and drink spending, one of these little beauties costs around $600 a day in fuel alone. All of the boats paraded along the foreshore and out to the heads this morning before the mass start. Some then went as far south as Nora Head, while others went towards Seal Rocks, the bigger crews heading east towards the edge of the continental shelf. And that's just where the biggest catches have been recorded. 7 tiger sharks weighing up to 300 kilos have been hooked up and are now being dragged back to port. 20 marlin have also been tagged and released. It's expected the biggest fish will be weighed in at the Nelson Bay Marina at around 7:30, and you can bet there'll be plenty of people there on hand just to get a close-up look at the monsters of the deep.
Way down the bush.
The Newcastle region was woken by southerlies gusting up to 110 kilometres an hour. 4 boats were ripped from their moorings at Lake Macquarie, while other vessels bobbed about like toys. With the wind came rain, 31 millimetres in Newcastle, nearly 50 millimetres or 2 inches in Dungog. But some drivers failed to take notice of the slippery conditions. 2 people charged with negligent driving after a 7-car pile-up on Maitland Road near Hexham at around 10:30 this morning. Traffic was delayed for more than half an hour as cars were cleared from the crash scene. 3 crashes also caused chaos on the New England Highway near Branxton, the worst a head-on collision between a delivery van and a sedan. The 23-year-old driver of the car was trapped for nearly 30 minutes as ambulance and fire crews joined forces to try and free her. She was later taken to Maitland Hospital with leg injuries. The 66-year-old driver of the van is being treated for minor injuries at Cessnock Hospital. And the driver of this 4-wheel drive escaped with minor injuries after he lost control of the vehicle, which then rolled outside the Prince of Wales Hotel in Merriweather. The wild weather has been created by a southerly change working its way up the coast. but the situation should ease tomorrow, which is welcome news to Newcastle Jockey Club preparing for its big two-day carnival. Organisers inspected the Broadmeadow track this afternoon and the meeting will go ahead. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
The Council decided by only a narrow margin last night to adopt a rating structure for the next financial year, based on recommendations of a task force of councillors, staff and community representatives. Their aim was to come up with a fair and equitable rate structure to alleviate the hardship which has been perceived in some sections of the city. There are 4 prime categories. Business and mining rates are based solely on the land value, but residential and rural rates consist of a $185 flat charge with a land value component added. In the case of residential land, this will be 0.58 cents in the dollar, and the rural amount, half of that.
It's a decision that has stunned many people in the harness racing fraternity. 10-year-old Kiwi gelding David Moss has won every major event on the Victorian pacing calendar, set new race records, and in just 3 races won over $100,000. But rather than enter him in the Sydney Inter-Dominion this weekend, where he would be short price favourite and collect another big cheque, his trainer wants him to run in Newcastle for the chance of substantially less prize money. But there's method in his madness.
I understand they've been allocated the Australian Pacing Championships. Well, I'm going to have a horse here, that's for sure. If I possibly can, I will.
Harold Park is also considered too cramped for the horse's style. At training this afternoon, Dave suffered a minor setback throwing a shoe. A few running repairs, though, had him balanced again and back on track. It took trainer Clive Herbert only a second to pick up the problem. There's a definite emotional bond between man and horse.
I'm not Davey's trainer, I'm his friend.
His record at the moment has him as the best horse in the Southern Hemisphere, but Clive believes Dave's career is only just starting.
There's no way that he's even reached his potential yet, and nothing happening to the horse. There's no reason why he can't truck on for the next couple of years and even keep on getting better.
David Moss will run in race 5 on Saturday night. Darren Curtis, NBN News.
Moving through the darkness as if in secrecy, a MiG-21 fighter seems just as menacing as when their design was unleashed nearly 40 years ago. This aircraft, however, formerly of the Polish Air Force, was snapped up and restored for about $750,000 in Eastern Europe's scramble to convert arms to hard currency. The jet left Sydney heading for a new home today. The MiG-21 was considered one of the most lethal aircraft in the world. They saw action in Korea and Vietnam and more recently in the former Czechoslovakia. This jet is on a more peaceful mission. It will take pride of place among other historic warbirds at Fighter World near Williamtown RAF Base. 2 RAF F-18s escorted the former foe along the coast, falling into combat formation over Port Stephens. The MiG still had one surprise up its sleeve. It was piloted by a high-ranking East European flying officer, here with a team of engineers to oversee the aircraft's handover. He was accompanied by Squadron Leader Phil Frawley, an expert in historic fighters. In another time and place, the two may well have been engaged in a deadly dogfight.
Fortunately, though, our 2 countries didn't have any difficulties with each other. This was a very secret aircraft when it first came out, but we have all the English translated books, both for maintenance and for operation of the aircraft, and they're excellent.
Going back in time again, what would you have preferred to fly? One of these or a Sabre, for example?
Well, they're all aeroplanes and I love them all, unfortunately, and it's difficult to choose a favourite.
It's been something of a culture shock for Martha Matlala and Ma Beauty Mkaze, leaving rural South Africa to visit Australia. One of the most noticeable differences is the availability of water.
Anytime you feel like having bath, you do have bath. Anytime you feel like drinking water, you do have water. Unlike in South Africa, because in South Africa you have to go a kilometre before you can do something or wash your face or drinking.
Martha and other women from the Transvaal township of Mutsi queue for water with 30,000 other people each day. The two women are in Newcastle to raise awareness about the forthcoming walk against want on Sunday, March 20th. Some of the money raised will go to their region.
I think it's important that it is actually a walk that we're doing. I think it reminds us that in poorer parts of the world, so many people, so many women walk every day, and we can walk in solidarity with them on that March the 20th.
Gary Harley's tipped primacy home first, followed by deposition and Scalacci. The Quinella paid $11, the trifecta $32.40. Then it was over to Canterbury for race 7, the Canterbury Guineas, over 1,900 metres. For 1 and 3, the trifecta paying $695.
Ideal conditions had the Williams River shining and the crowd building for the start of Auski. The late withdrawal of Newcastle Scott Comity left the field without a local, but the spectators weren't complaining as the sports elite paraded their skills.
We've got world champions in each event, trick, slalom and jump, and they just keep coming back and back. And you look at them in Singapore at the world champions late last year, and once again they're that keen to come back to Auski and tie it in with the Australian tour.
At the end of the day, Sweden's Helena Chalander led the women's slalom, Britain's Andy Mappel on top in the men's. Dual winner Bruce Neville led the men's jump, the finals to be held tomorrow. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Ready for work in strong gloves, a sun hat and sensible shoes, the Lord Mayor joined hundreds of volunteers prepared to brighten the city's overall appearance. My Lord Mayor leading by example this morning.
Oh, well, certainly, but I enjoy doing it, and it's something that's great for the city.
Even at this early stage of the day, it's quite a remarkable variety of rubbish that's been collected.
Yes, there is, all sorts of things, but the plastics are the ones that are the real worry.
There were more volunteers this year, around 8,000 of them, but much less junk. Organisers believe the clean-up days are making a difference. Over the past week, 6,000 school students and 25 businesses have targeted areas to tidy. At Lake Macquarie, MSB boats were used to clear rubbish from islands off Pelican.
People are far more cleanliness conscious than they were, and of course the programs through the schools is tremendous.
20 tonnes of car bodies were collected along with 200 tonnes of rubbish. Among the odd finds, 2 safes dumped in the bush.
That safe appears to be peeled open from the inside out.
Back at the foreshore, we left the Lord Mayor in search of more unsightly rubbish. Andrew Lobb, NBN News. With a fresh coat of paint and repairs to its hull, the veteran police launch Belmont is back in action, this time with the Royal Australian Volunteer Coastal Patrol. It'll be used for inshore and offshore rescue work. Former police crew and Coastal Patrol volunteers were among those at the boat's christening. Federal member for Shortland, Peter Morris, called for greater recognition and financial support for the volunteer service, which from its Pelican base monitored 26,000 radio calls last year, towed in 160 boats and responded to almost 30 serious rescues.
We do have an obligation to make some contribution, I believe, right across the community, and maybe through the Waterways Authority, maybe if we could have some arrangement where a percentage or a portion or a designated fee could be set aside as income for our volunteer search and rescue organisations.
Jill Merler, wife of Hunter District Police Commander Heinz Moeller, performed the official duties.